All right, moving on with learning how to solve equations. The next type of thing that we're going to solve is equations with distributing. Equations with distributing. Now remember the distributive property from a previous video, hopefully. So here's the warm-up. Are these expressions equivalent? So we've got two algebraic expressions. One is 5, and then a set of parentheses, x minus 2y plus 10. And the other one is 5x minus 10y plus 50. So question is, are they equivalent? And the answer to that is yes. And how do we know? Well, there are a couple different ways that we know. One thing that we could do is we could use the distributive property like we talked about in the I can statement. So if we distribute through, this gets its turn being multiplied by every term inside. So this is 5 times x, which is 5x, 5 times negative 2y, which is negative 10y, and 5 times 10, which is positive 50. So those look the same. Or we could actually do this, and this is kind of the tricky part. Hopefully you remember this. You'll notice that all of these have a similar factor. They have a common factor of 5. So we could take out a 5. If we divide out a 5, remember this is multiplying in. What we're doing here when we factor is we're dividing out. So let's see, take out a 5, we'd be left with an x. Take out a 5, remember not subtract 5, divide by 5, we're left with a negative 2y, and divide by 5 and we end up with positive 10. So this turns into that right there. So they are the same. You can tell that by either distributing or by factoring. Now, there's often more than one way to get the correct answer or write an expression, and knowing as many ways as possible to get an answer or to write an expression is really useful. So you remember this property that we talked about in a previous video called the distributive property. Distributive property. It's the distributive property of multiplication, and it was the ability of multiplication to distribute over addition and subtraction. And we talked about how there aren't very many operations that have this ability. The ability to distribute is very rare, okay? But distributing multiplication over addition and subtraction, and its opposite, which we showed above, factoring, those are both really useful. So we're going to solve this equation right here. Now, when we're solving this equation, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get rid of those parentheses by distributing. And again, I like drawing those kind of swooping lines there to remind you that I've got to multiply both of them. So this would be 2 times r, and then 2 times negative 3 would be negative 6, equals negative 12. And now I've got a two-step equation. So I'm going to add 6. I'm going to show my work for each one of these. Those cancel to be 0. 2r equals, this is negative 6. And divide by 2, those cancel to be a 1, so I get r equals negative 3. Now I just want to show you and make sure that we know this is correct, because if I plug this in right there, 2 times, wherever there's an r, we're going to put a negative 3. Negative 3 minus 3 equals negative 12. So let's do the order of operations here. We're still checking to see if this is right. Negative 3 minus 3 would be negative 6. 2 times negative 6, does negative 12 equal negative 12? Yep, it does. So that one checks out. So here's the way we're going to do these. Generally, we're going to distribute the multiplication to get rid of the parentheses. And then solve the equation. So it's kind of like we're doing a little bit of simplifying first. So we are going to distribute to get rid of that set of parentheses. So if we do this problem right here, and again, we always show our work on these. So this is going to be negative 12x minus 3 equals negative 63. We've now got ourselves a two-step equation, which we should be good at solving by now. So we're going to isolate the variable term. So we're going to add 3 here and add 3 here. So this is negative 12x, and this is a negative 60 on this side. So now we're going to isolate the variable, get the variable all by itself. So we're going to get rid of timesing by negative 12 by dividing by negative 12. These cancel to be a 1, so we've got a 1x on this side. Those cancel to be a positive. Let's see, 60 divided by 12 is 5. So there's our answer on that one. Okay, same thing. Distribute through to get rid of parentheses. So 25 equals 10x plus 5. Inverse operation, subtract 5. Those undo each other. Those make a 0, cancel to be 0. Over on this side I get a 20. Still got to get the x by itself, so I've got to get rid of that timesing by 10, so I'm going to divide both sides by 10. So those cancel to be a 1, which is what we want. And 20 divided by 10 cancels to be a 2. So x is equal to 2. And again, on a test or a quiz, you can always plug it back in and make sure that you got the answer right before you leave it. So I'd always encourage you to do that. I'm not going to take time to do that here, but it would be a good idea if you were to do something like that. Okay, let's take a look at this one right here. Distribute the negative through. Make sure we do both of them. So this is negative 5 and negative 5z. Negative 5 times 1 is negative 5, and negative 5 times z is negative 5z. 150 over here. Let's see, we're going to add 5, so those cancel to be 0. Negative 5z here, and then we've got 155 here. Divide by negative 5, cancel to be a positive 1z, which is what we want, and then a positive divided by a negative. This is where I do something called compartmentalizing. I kind of figure out the sign of the answer, and then let's figure out what the number is. If you know what 155 divided by 5 is, great. If you don't, let's do a little problem over here. There's no problem doing a little long division. Let's see, it doesn't go into 1, but it does go into 15. It goes in there 3 times, so that would be 15. Carry the 5, 31. So the answer on this one is negative 31. So no problem showing a little bit of extra work like that. So great example on that one. Okay, let's take a look at this one. Let's go ahead and distribute, get rid of those parentheses. So I've got an 18 over here, a negative 54y here, and let's see, positive times negative is negative, 6 times 15 is 90. And again, this kind of shows we've got some multiplication here that, some integers here. This is in our times tables, we ought to know that, but if we had to do something off to the side where we're multiplying those together, that's a 30 and then a 60, and add those together. No problem with doing something like that. So let's go ahead and finish this up. We're going to add 90 to both sides. So this is, let's see if we add those together, that's 108, negative 54y. So big numbers, but we still use the same ideas. We need to get rid of timesing by negative 54, so we're going to divide by negative 54. Those cancel to be at 1, so we've got a y over here, and then a positive divided by a negative. Answer is going to be negative. And let's stop and think about this for just a second. 108 on the top and 54 on the bottom. 108 divided by 54. Well, if this were 100 divided by 50, I'm hoping everybody could get that. That would just be a 2. This is 54. What would happen if you doubled 4? That would be 8. So if you doubled 54, you get 108. So this is a negative 2 for an answer there. So again, sometimes you'll end up with some big numbers, but just kind of work your way through them. If you need to show some work like we did over here, totally okay. All right, use the distributive property. Negative 16n minus 10 equals 54. Again, really the only work that we do on that first step is just getting rid of the set of parentheses, just using that distributive property to kind of simplify. Let's see, I'm going to add 10, cancel to be 0, 64, divide by 16, negative 16, cancel to be a 1, which is what we want. Answer is going to be negative. Let's see, 64 divided by 16. If we have to do something like this, it's going to be more than 2. If you try 4 times, you're going to end up with 64. 4 times 10 would be 40, and then 4 times 6 would be 24, so we get to 64. So this is going to be a 4 for the answer there. Again, don't be afraid of something like that. Go ahead and kind of have confidence in the steps that you're doing, and then if you need to do a little arithmetic off to the side, distribute through, negative 30, negative 12x, negative 42. And now we kind of should be in a comfort zone because we're solving a two-step equation, and we're going to add 30, cancel to be 0, negative 12, divide by negative 12 on both sides because we want to get rid of that multiplication. Get a 1x over here, and negative 12 divided by negative 12 is positive 1. And again, you can always plug things in and check and make sure you got the answer right. Okay, let's go ahead and do this one. Last one. Distribute through, negative y, and then a lot of people miss this right here. A negative times a negative, this is a positive 10, and over on this side we have a negative 15. So if you do that wrong, if you were to just write negative 10 here, you're going to get the answer wrong. It's going to be a pretty easy problem, but you'd get the answer wrong because you do the wrong inverse operation. So we're going to subtract 10 from both sides. Those will cancel to be 0. Negative 25 here. We don't want negative y, we want its opposite, positive y. So we don't want negative 25, we want its opposite, positive 25. And again, just as a double check, let's see if that makes the equation true. Plug it in right there. Negative 25 minus 10 equals negative 15. Let's check and see. Negative 25 minus 10 is 15. Yep, negative 15 equals negative 15. So that checks out. That makes the equation true. All right, so that is equations with distributing. Hopefully you're in good shape. Thanks.